You're listening to the 2025 Forecasts and Predictions Crucial Update series, a special run of episodes highlighting the biggest change in the housing market that we have seen since this podcast began back in 2019. For the full series, head to the podcast library and be sure you get all the latest updates on this new, evolving market and the new advantages for first-time homebuyers. Let's go. Welcome to the finale of the Critical Market Shift Update. Things are changing, so what's next? Inventory's up. Prices are going down, and Taylor Swift is engaged. So much happening. Let's go.
How to Buy a Home educates, protects, and connects first-time homebuyers to qualified vetted realtors in their area. Whether you're looking for DIY information or step-by-step guidance, How to Buy a Home is the #1 resource for first-time homebuyers.
What is up, my How to Buy a Homies? This is part 3 of the series on the important shift in the summer 2025 housing market, one that we've been waiting for, if you're a first-time home buyer, for a long, long time. I'm your host, David Sidoni, and hopefully you've heard parts 1 and parts 2 on the changes in home prices, interest rates, home sales, inventory, and regional data. Today, I'm going to be updating you on the improvements that we are seeing in starter home affordability, and then I have some high-level tactics and tips to share with you so you can take advantage of this fluctuating market. We're going to start today with affordability. Now, for most aspiring first-time homebuyers, this has been more than just the elephant in the room. It walked in the damn room and sat on top of you. We have been in an insanely abnormal post-COVID housing market. I mean, in 2020, home prices were $315,000 for a median home. And now we're looking at $438,000. That's up 39% in the last 5 years, which is double the average 3 to 4%, which would have been 15 to 20% in a normal rising market. So, of course, any idiot can see that over the last 5 years, the affordability math has sucked. But the good news is, all the data that I shared with you in parts 1 and 2 of this forecast point towards the change. Homes are getting more affordable. Let's start with how the real estate economists calculate housing affordability. They do it with multiple different variables. It is so much more than just the price. They calculate the prices combined with mortgage rates, household incomes, along with your debt-to-income ratios, upfront savings requirements, and ongoing ownership costs. That's your taxes, your insurance, and HOAs. So in those calculations, by today's particular affordability index, things are starting to improve. I already discussed that prices are flattening in much of the country, but when we add in the interest rates dropping, right now in this shifting and changing market, a home that last year was less expensive and say it's gone up 1 or 2%, well, that home, even though it costs more right now, according to the affordability matrix, it's more affordable now because the interest rates have dropped. So this is great news. That means the affordability index, that's shifting in your favor. But here's the better news. The formula used by the real estate economists, what I just told you about, it is greatly flawed. Their formula omits one key economic factor when it comes to, is buying a home affordable? It's the rent that you pay. Buying a home solely on the original old school mathematical formula for home affordability, it's just not the best financial move anymore. The reason is because this is not a want purchase. This is not an extra luxury that you're splurging on, waiting for it to go on deep discount. This is a necessity purchase. You already pay for basic shelter, and you're going to pay for that regardless. And the price for that, whether renting or owning, it's going up both ways. But now we're actually seeing it go down on the price side. I'm astonished that the old school financial gurus and economists don't educate renters on how to utilize this crucial largest monthly output known as your rent. Too many people in their 20s and 30s look at the home price and the down payment, and then they calculate their full monthly principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, PITI. They calculate that full payment. And then they compare that payment to their rent payment. And they think that affordable means only when a new mortgage payment is less than their current rent payment. This is old school and uninformed thinking, and it has renters misinformed on affordability. And recently, it's got most of you guys paralyzed by fear. So according to their old school archaic affordability metrics, we're at multi-decade lows when it comes to housing affordability. But again, this doesn't take into account the rent output that you're doing right now. So as a result, in 2024, first-time home buyers, they only heard that affordability data, and they heard that everything was in the toilet and it was just not good to buy a home right now. And the share of first-time home buyers last year fell to only 26%. That is the lowest since the National Association of Realtors began tracking all the way back in 1981. 26% is incredibly low, and it's causing a panic for everybody in the real estate industry. The average has been 40% over the last 43 years. That's a huge drop. And on top of that, the average age of the first-time home buyers increased to a crazy new high. Since 1981, the average has been 31 years old. A couple of years ago, it went to 36. Last year, it ballooned to 38. And the 2025 average age, gang, this stat has me shook. We're at 41 years old. 41. That is tragic. And here's the biggest bummer about it. It's not affordability that is the biggest cause for the rise in the age of the average first-time home buyer. It's the fear and the ignorance. Now, if you're a new listener, ignorance is not a dirty word on this podcast because it literally means you don't know what you don't know. And by putting an index on affordability out there, the public is being misinformed. They're just being told, nope, you absolutely can't do it. You can't afford it. Which means there are a bunch of people between the ages of 20 and 41, renters out there who don't realize they still have a path to home ownership despite the so-called affordability crisis of 2024 and 2025. The real crisis, it's the lack of practical education and knowledge. Most of the renters out there don't know half of what's possible for them. And unfortunately, this is due to that ginormous void in first-time homebuyer education, including helping them start with the planning process 6 months or a year ahead of time. Too many hopeful first-time homebuyers, they do this planning on their own, thinking that affordability has shut them out right now because they're ignorantly unaware that there may be some real options for them right now. The information they find out there in their research, it's so limited, so tragically discouraging, and it's just so plain wrong. But unfortunately, that's what stops them in their tracks. But we've got different data here. Over 6 years, 72% of the people who have reached out to How to Buy a Home and they tell us they think they're a year or 2 years from buying a home, they find out that with the correct guidance and the planning assistance, they actually have more options available to them. And the stat, they're under contract in an average of 3.2 months. That's 72% of the people that reach out are under contract way sooner than they thought they could. I've seen tens of thousands of people who want to own a home think that they need so much more than is actually necessary, and they wait heartbreakingly too long to seek a professional opinion of an expert who is well-versed in the options for first-time homebuyers. They think that they need to have more income or a higher credit score. They need to reduce all of their debt, or they need so much more savings for a down payment. They get stuck. There are so many creative solutions available that just are not mainstream. And that's the fault of the real estate industry for disrespecting and ignoring you. So don't let the challenge of affordability stop you in your planning. You're getting the information right now. I'm here to change things so you know. Because I'm quite positive that, according to my data, at least 72% of you right now, you might be ready to buy a home right now. And I think that stat's probably a lot higher, especially right now because we've got a changing housing market. Real affordability comes to you with knowledge. And with that knowledge, you can create a mindset shift. The mathematical reality in a high rent market like the one we're in right now is that if you believe affordability is a lower monthly mortgage payment than your rent payment, unfortunately, that means you're missing the big picture. And while you sit around and wait for that to happen, wait for that PITI payment to be less than the rent that you pay, well, you're continuing to pay that rent to someone else with no return, when you could be transferring that payment to yourself into a home. A mortgage payment is so much more than just your monthly shelter payment. A home that you own is a forced savings account. So for 6 years here on the podcast, back to 2019, and then all the way back to 2013 before that, I've been working with first-time homebuyers, and I've been watching the metrics on affordability make owning a home seem less and less attainable. And that's especially true when the renters didn't get the full information to calculate without accounting for a rent loss. For 6 years here on the podcast, back to 2019, and then 6 more years before that to 2013, I've been helping first-time homebuyers, and during that run-up, we've been watching the metrics on affordability make owning a home seem less and less attainable. And that's especially because a lot of the renters, before they come to me, they didn't get the full information, and they're calculating affordability without accounting for the rent loss. That's why in the 2020s, I began describing buying a home in a different way. No longer are we chasing the affordable American dream, trying to buy a deal. It's been renamed here to help you find a rent replacement strategy because the rising rent market has shifted the formula. Owning earlier is always mathematically your best way to utilize your income for your maximum financial gains. So when you adjust your mindset, affordability is in the eye of the beholder. And that beholder has a spreadsheet. And when we look at the calculations today, I've got bitchin' news for you. It's getting easier. Now, it was doable before. It's just even more doable now. But if you want to hear about how people were doing it when it wasn't even as easy as it's going to be for the rest of the year, you can go back and listen to the interviews from buyers who have bought homes during the last couple of years when interest rates were at 7 or 8% and prices were going up at a much faster pace than they are right now. The stories aren't about people who had a huge amount of money saved or got a giant gift from their mom or dad or got some weird big inheritance. There are stories of single moms, single women, single dudes, people who are the first person ever in their family to buy a home, and even one couple that lived in a van for 7 years. They use things like a low down payment option or debt management solutions, even for those fatty student loans. They did things to lower their mortgage interest rate by using either mortgage rate buy downs or improving their credit or just finding the right program that had a lower rate for them. And a lot of them looked at the PMI math and they realized they were going to accept that and find better ways to buy a home that best suited them. They made sure they had credit score improvements for better rates and lower fees. They got down payment assistance programs, and a lot of them even got direct seller cash credits to them. So yeah, things are better now. And you should be really encouraged to know that people have been doing this in the last couple of years, which is probably going to be looked at as the toughest time ever to buy a home, especially as a first-time home buyer. I don't end every show saying, you can do this unless the affordability is too out of whack, then you actually can't. No, I just say, you can do this. And I mean in any market. And today, change is happening, so it's even more affordable moving ahead for the rest of the year. Affordability is not a brick wall. There's a more nuanced, creative path to homeownership. I don't want you to look back when you're 41 years old and add up all the rent that you've paid for 20 years. And I'm not giving you some get-rich-quick scheme to try to pump you all up and have you buy some webinar or something. All I'm giving you is the data and then a plan to make this your last lease ever. If you want that, go to episode 350 for the last lease ever and episode 355 for the full numbers breakdown on renting versus buying. Once the market started moving in 2021-22, I've been saying here on the podcast, buying in the 2020s, it's not going to be a super bargain basement purchase. It's not going to be a sexy deal, but it's not crazy sexy until you look back 10 years from now. So for real, if you want to understand affordability, go back and listen to the interviews. These are real stories with real people using real techniques that you can use. And then just this morning, as I was getting all this information together here, putting my notes together for this podcast, I actually ran into this article where someone else interviewed other first-time home buyers. This was the headline. Who can actually buy a house today? Meet the elite buyers achieving the American dream. Now, elite was in quotes, but the point of the article was to dispel the myth that you had to be elite to buy in this market. It told the story of 3 sets of first-time home buyers, all of them the beginning of this year, when the market was tougher than it is now, who figured out that high home prices and interest rates were not going to deter them from their dream of becoming a homeowner. The article mentioned Emma, who's 25. She works in marketing in the construction industry, making $63,000 a year. Her plan was to buy a home for about $300,000 in Greenville, South Carolina. She wanted 3 bedrooms and a yard for her dog. Well, when she started looking, her real estate agent said that she was surprised that the local market had become much more buyer-friendly, with more listings for sale and waning competition. The real estate agent said that was a stark contrast to recent times when buying a house was more of a mad dash, with fierce competition, bidding wars. That was everywhere. And the buyers had to accept homes with no repairs, as in condition. And usually, there were lots of repairs that were needed. And sometimes, the sellers would even only accept offers that waived the traditional home inspection altogether. But not for Emma. At the beginning of this year, she found an abundance of listings ripe for the taking. Her region was already starting to change in the shift that we're seeing right now, moving into a buyer's market. Emma jumped in at a time when everything was starting to flip and shift. She closed on the perfect house for her in March. It was $305,000, which was below the list price. She used a 10% down payment and she got a mortgage of 6.45%, and that kept her monthly payments below the $2,000 that she wanted. In fact, she got such a deal, the seller even offered to cover part of the closing costs, homeowners insurance premiums, and they replaced the roof and fixed a crawl space as part of the deal. The article said that in spite of all the odds stacked against Emma with high prices and mortgage rates, that some people like her were still achieving the American dream of buying a home. The next buyers that they showcased were from Mesa, Arizona. Haley, who was a nurse, and Hunter, a service advisor that sells recreational vehicles. Together, they earn about $155,000 a year. Their budget was about $500,000. Well, they made a couple offers that fell through. They were outbid on the first one and withdrew from the second one when they found some issues during the inspection. And they were at the airport, ready to go, on a flight to Hawaii to celebrate their 1-year anniversary, when they got a phone notification and they went, oh my God, this is it. This is our dream home. So they put in an offer immediately through their real estate agent, negotiated the price, and that's the home they got. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home with a nice big yard, walk-in closet, no HOA. And get this, it was listed at $450,000, and they actually negotiated it down to $435,000, and they closed on the house in May using a 3.5% down payment. That's an FHA loan, and they got an interest rate of 6.2%, and they were also able to get the seller to cover 3% of the purchase price. And that concession covered closing costs and other expenses. Haley said, we got everything we wanted. They went on in the article to explain what they did when they were preparing to buy. They had monthly budget dates, little air quotes on that. They had a little date where they talked about their finances once a month. These guys are pretty serious, because after they got engaged, they moved in with their friends. They were roommates with people as an engaged couple. Even though everyone gave them a hard time about it, that arrangement allowed them to save money and reach their home buying goal. And the third couple they showcased were Anna and Ryan, who were 28 and 30 years old, and a married couple, young professionals, and they were moving from New Hampshire to the greater Boston area. They started looking at the end of January this year. They toured 15 homes and put in 3 offers, outbid each time. That Boston market was crazy competitive at the beginning of this year. The article said that they were super surprised by how quick things were moving. But that's the way things were going back then. Finally, their 4th offer on a home was accepted. Now, these guys had 20% down. They got a 6.75% interest rate. And in the article, they didn't tell us exactly what they paid, but they did say it was over the list price. And the median price in the town where they purchased was like $825,000. Their tips were that when they were looking to save up, they decided to rent a very affordable apartment. Now, very affordable was in quotes. So I think that means super cheap, super small. But it also happened to be in New Hampshire. And that was great for them because they didn't have to pay sales or income tax on their wages while they were living in that state. And that helped them save up money. Now, they interviewed a bunch of people. Well, these are the 3 that they showcased. They did also write in the article that after multiple interviews with multiple first-time buyers from 2025, that some of the older first-time home buyers, they've been successful by fusing financial assets such as stocks and retirement savings for a down payment. And some of the younger buyers in their 20s, They use diligent budgeting with a full financial plan in place before they went home shopping. And when they were home shopping, they were quite surprised and excited to find that there were a lot of options that didn't make them feel house poor. It's crazy. I found that article this morning. I had to share it with you. We've got a bunch of stories like that in the podcast library, but it's great to hear that there are people who beat the tough market at the beginning of the year, especially because now we're going into one that's not going to be so tough. These are stories before the shift in inventory prices and interest rates. You're going to have more advantages than they do. Well, with the right real estate support team, your realtors and your lenders helping you out, you're going to be able to find creative solutions like these. Some first-time homebuyers are adjusting. They're looking at smaller homes or condos so they can break in the market and just get in, because it's not timing the market, it's your time in the market. With that same philosophy, there are other people, especially remote workers, that are looking a little further out of the expensive areas when they live, or where they live, I should say. They're looking for cheaper cities. Some are also looking at co-buying with friends or family. That can be a little tricky, but there are some people that are using that so they can get what they really want. And of course, a lot of people are using down payment assistance. And additionally, some folks are looking at new homes because the new home builders, they're increasingly targeting the entry-level price points, which could yield a lot more options for us in the $300,000 and $400,000 range in certain markets, especially if you're looking for no-frills models that are aimed directly at first-time home buyers. Oh, well, that's good. Well, my friend from part 2 of this series, Mr. Chairman, now him and all his buddies can build smaller homes, which, less materials, so it costs less. And not to mention, it takes less labor to build a smaller home, but they can still charge more for them. Great. All right, back to the positive stuff. Here's some industry expert tips on how you can analyze some of the data that's changing right now so you can achieve maximum benefits in this new market. Days on market is the stat that we look at a lot, and it is a huge indicator when you're looking at shifting markets. It's how many days since the home went up for sale. Now, we've been in a lightning fast market. I mean, here in Southern California for the last 5 years, seriously, me and my team, we have sold almost every single home in just one weekend, like 6 hours. 3 hours of open house Saturday, 3 hours of open house Sunday, bam, all for Sunday night. But then this summer, we started to see a shift. Here's the national data, the average days on market for the last few years. In 2019, before the pandemic, we were at 27 days. 2020, we were at 24 days on the market. Then in 21, 17 days. In 22, it was only 14 days. 23, we went up to 18. 24, we went up to 22. And now, in 2025, we're at exactly the same number of days on market on average as we were in 2019, 27 days. Every region's going to vary, but let me give you some general information on how you can use days on market to help you with your strategy. First thing you got to realize about days on the market is that every seller is different, and sometimes they're just stubborn and totally out of whack with the actual market value. But especially in a market like this, sometime a home that has longer days on market, it might indicate a seller who maybe they've got delusions of a giant profit and they're watching the market and they're watching things not sell around them. And suddenly they're starting to get a grip on the reality that could be slipping away, which means they could be more open to negotiating on price or terms or even repairs. Right now in this shift, oftentimes what you're finding is people have overpriced their home and it's poor timing for them. That sucks. But don't let the days on market scare you. This could be an unrealistic seller who now is potentially getting more realistic. So right now in some places, the over list price bidding war era is over. So price reduced homes, they represent an opportunity, not a risk, especially when you approach them strategically. In the beginning of a shifting market, sometimes sellers overprice and have to move their price to try to get in line with what's really happening. Price reduction could be a signal to you that they've given up holding out for their outdated expectations. Buyers, every time you see price reduction, you got to think to yourself, okay, is this a red flag or is this a hidden opportunity? A lot of times, especially for the end of this year, that means you've got some leverage. The way it works is, once one of those sellers with the outdated pricing gets enough market feedback, they start to realize things need to change. They take a look around and they realize they're getting fewer and fewer showings, or they're getting a lot of stalled interest. No one's even calling to look at the home anymore. Well, if they're serious, they're going to make the right price adjustment at that same home that's been sitting there for a while, and suddenly you might consider that same home a strong value at that new price. Today, the average price reduction after 90 days is 5.1%, and after 120 days, it's 8.5%. So how do you identify if a seller is desperate or if the price cut they're doing is some kind of strategy? Well, it's all about your team. You need expert advocates who track real-time data, especially in this shifting market. Your agent's expertise in assessing current values in a fluid situation, that's going to be your secret weapon. Skilled and specialized insight can be the difference between overpaying or you getting yourself a great deal. Now, more than ever, you need a unicorn realtor and a lender. And hey, I'm not just saying hire a unicorn because I think my unicorns are the only way to buy a home. They're just the people that I've vetted. I just know the statistics and how many people out there are not necessarily great at doing this job. And I know the playbook of the industry isn't doing anything to change that. They're going to offer you the newbies and the untrained agents or lousy customer service. Honestly, I don't care whether you use my unicorns or you find your own unicorns. My advice to every first-time home buyer right now in this changing market is the same. There are major opportunities available to you, and the expertise of your team is going to be how you maximize your benefits. They're going to be able to uncover options and get you better deals than we've seen in a long time. So whoever you hire, make sure they have unicorn vibes. Someone very special, way above average. Because when you've got a detailed pro who is extremely active in this market, that's the big advantage. You're hiring so much more than just a door opener in this market right now. You don't want someone just to show you homes. I mean, you're going to have more options available to you, which means your realtor is going to have more options for negotiations on your behalf. In markets like this, here's the real pro tip. To a supreme, ultimate realtor, negotiating the price is actually one of the simplest factors in what we do. The real value from your agent and the real value that they get for you, it comes in the negotiation of the terms of your contract. That takes deep knowledge and understanding of the entire process. Yeah, they're going to get you the best price the sellers will accept, but the real value comes in the negotiations in many other aspects of the deal. They can make your offer look more attractive in many ways, and maybe they use that to lower the price, or maybe they use that to get you more value net to you based on credits that come back to you. So work with your team to set up your best strategies, because you're going to be looking at areas like the contingency or conditions or due diligence timeline period. Adjusting that could mean you get a better value. You can also adjust the occupancy dates, or, when you get the keys is what that means, or the length of the contract. There's options to get more value with deals on the termite, the radon, or the sewer inspections. When you're negotiating the repairs, that could be a huge value to you. Not to mention home warranties, solar transfers, appliances, personal property items. In fact, they could even negotiate for you cash in your pocket by getting a credit from the seller at the closing. All right, back to some more data and tips that you can pounce on. Right now, condos and townhomes are one of the most buyer-friendly parts of the housing market. There's about 200,000 condos listed for sale right now, and that's double what we had a couple of years ago. According to the Intercontinental Exchange, condo prices have dipped 1.3% in June, and over half of the top 100 U.S. metros saw condo prices drop in the last 12 months. More options, less competition. Plus, with a condo, it's a really easy valuation of the price since there's going to be comparable units. It's real easy. It's just apples to apples. So the shift we're seeing there, it's not just helping you with your affordability to get in, it also is shifting the power dynamic of the negotiations. Redfin said in a recent article, quote, "Condo buyers in many cities may be able to find sellers who are willing to give concessions and or sell for less than their asking price." I've been telling buyers for 20 years now, if you're in an apartment, a lateral move to a condo, not only is it a strong move for your overall financial well-being, it's a lot easier than you think. Okay, break down the math with me. On a $300,000 or $400,000 condo, you only need a 3% down payment. So 3% on $300,000 is $9,000. If you're renting or leasing a place for $2,000 a month, your security deposit plus your first and last, it's not much more than $9,000. You even have the opportunity to get down payment assistance or a seller credit to cover most or all of that down payment and closing costs, in which case it would be cheaper than you getting another lease. And speaking of down payment assistance, here's another tip for you. The second quarter this year, we saw the debut of 45 brand new homebuyer assistance programs, which is a 2% increase from the first quarter this year. According to the latest Homeownership Program Index report published by the Down Payment Resource, there are currently 2,554 homebuyer assistance programs operating today, and that is a new record. Well, how to buy a homies? Here we are. You know, I can't tell what's going on in the future. Travis and Taylor are engaged. I didn't see that one coming. But I did tell you that when I see any shifts in the housing market that I would tell you. Okay, gang, I see one. How long it's going to last and what's next, that's going to be tough to say. But right now, the data is telling us that for the rest of 2025, first-time homebuyers are going to be in a situation where they have more opportunities than they've had in a long time. And the economists' continued forecasts beyond the end of the year, they vary quite a bit. Most agree that the pent-up demand combined with all the massively underbuilt inventory is going to prop up the prices, even though we might get more homes coming on the market. And some people think, like I told you earlier, that we're only halfway through 30 years of this odd prices up only market. Those that are not fully on board with that particular forecast, they still agree that low inventory is going to stave off a giant crash. As for the guesses, if this is the beginning of not a crash, but more of a correction, a normal decline, it's very interesting. See, every other major developed country, like Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Japan, etc., they've all had a post-pandemic housing decline. So we haven't really had one. Are we going to see one here? Or will the current administration, with the upcoming midterm elections, where they're going to attempt to force policies into place to keep things growing? Now, if the data ever starts to move in a negative direction regarding the economy in general, government intervention is going to be swift and decisive to stave off a recession. They're going to do that to the absolute best of their ability. So for the future, I would say it's in flux. And if you had a flux capacitor, you could go back in time, and here's some information you would find. That every renter since World War II who bought a home in all markets in any time period, if they'd bought a home 5 years later, they were in a better financial position through all the ups and downs. Renters tell me all the time. This year, I've heard so many people say to me, dude, I wish I'd bought in 2020. And I'm positive that in 2030, people are going to say the exact same thing to me. Now, if you're wondering why I'm positive of that, it's not because of the data. It's because I've heard it for 20 years. I heard it last year. I heard it the year before that. And I heard it even further back. In 2019, I heard it when people were talking about 2014 because the market shot up a lot then. And in 2016, I heard it because from 2011 to 2016, the market shot up then. And all the times in between, all the way back to 2006 when I first started, people told me, man, I should have bought in 2001. And people said the same thing through the recessions of the 1990s and through 18% interest rates of the 1980s. But still, 5 years, you would have been better than you were if you'd rented. So the data is changing and the future might be murky, but one thing is certain, renters in 2030 will wish that they'd bought here in 2025 in this unique opportunity. I know what's going on out there. I hear it. Fear is too prevalent right now. And if you're here, then you are miles ahead of everyone else. You have a great advantage. Use that to look back at yourself later with pride. I want to see renters be led by knowledge, not fear, and certainly not pressure to do something that you don't think is wise. That's not what's happening here. I mean, I quit my broker back in 2019 because I wanted to educate and share what I had learned, but I saw it wasn't being taught. Yes, there are challenges in every single market, but you can overcome them. And Realtor.com's chief economist advised that in any market, preparing will get fast-acting buyers a bigger advantage. This holds true especially for first-time home buyers. The people who get financially ready, they improve their credit, they secure their pre-approvals, they lock in their rates. And the folks who educate themselves on the process, they're going to be poised to jump on opportunities as the market fluctuates. I'm looking at the data 24/7. That's so I can help you best navigate the best solution for you. And I told you I'd tell you if and when I see a change. So I'm telling you, there's a change. And you can check the track record. It's been no BS on this show for 6 years. I drop market updates at least twice a year. And when things really move, I drop in urgent updates. And in fact, way back on episode 168, I actually bought www.getoffyourass.org because buyers were so frightened, and yet the inventory was low and I saw an opportunity. I still own it if you want to. I'll have JT put it in the show notes. You can click on it. Today, sure, the math is probably saying you're not going to net a 39% return for 5 years like we saw the last 5 years. That was a post-pandemic, once-in-a-lifetime, artificially created rebound housing market. But today, you'll still be better off in 2030 if you're a homeowner. And your current advantage for the rest of this year is choice. So if you've got more questions, you can go to howtobuyahome.com and ask me directly. There's a place you can click Ask David, and I answer all those. You can also get more education and information there. Of course, you can always check out the podcast library. There's tons of information there. And of course, also on the website there, you can ask me directly for a unicorn team. They're watching the market just like I am. And we are so excited to build you your custom plan so you can qualify to buy a home. They're watching the market just like I am. And we are all so excited to see these shifts, these changes, this choice for first-time home buyers. And we want to make sure that everybody out there buys a home with the most strategic and the best personal custom plan for you, taking advantage of the choices that are out there right now. You can do this.
Looking for more DIY education or your own personal step-by-step guidance through the home buying journey? Since 2019, How to Buy a Home has been the #1 resource for first-time home buyers. So visit howtobuyahome.com to get started.